mental health matters, regardless of your gender. And for boys and young men, it's often a challenge to even talk about it. Hi, I'm Stephen Jiwanma. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm your host for the Avidum podcast. Avidum is a nonprofit that empowers students to shatter the silence around mental health and suicide. In this episode, we're shining a spotlight on how mental health impacts boys and young men, especially during the years they're in school. First up, you'll hear from Brian Yang, a high school senior who started a project called Mind the Boys. Here's our conversation. So, Brian, thank you so much for being on the podcast. And I know we're talking about mental health in boys, among boys, and you are, in high school. And so I've got to ask you, how did you get interested in boys' mental health?
Oh, thank you so much for having me, Mr. Steven. Um, I guess I really got interested in mental health first because in my freshman year, because I realized like in my school personally, like there's a lot of boys who were struggling with their own mental health, but they were really like isolating themselves and they weren't like coming to their friends and asking for help. They just kind of like kept to themselves about it. And I realized like this was like and it, like almost like got to the point like where one of my like classmates, like male classmates, actually like died by suicide that year. And I think like it was like almost pushed under the rug, like there was not much discussion about it. But I was like, this is really an issue like among boys and like there's no attention to it. Like people are not recognizing it. Like it's a silent crisis.
A silent
So
crisis. Gotcha.
so I realized why is this like I asked the questions like why is this happening to boys, like why are boys not coming out and talking about it? Like I think that it's hard for boys to talk about mental health because maybe there's a lot of like societal expectations that boys need to act like masculine and like should not talk about their emotions, and I think that really hurts them because like they feel like they have to deal with their mental issues like on their own, and they realistically they really should like go and try to ask for help. Like there's some issues you cannot deal with alone. So I think that it's important for boys to like understand that they, should be able to talk about their mental health and should be able to ask for help. So that actually led me to create a blog, Implemental, because that combines mental health with self-improvement. Because during this like time, I felt like self-improvement is really like popular among like young men. So I felt like combining it with mental health, I I think I would have like a better reach towards like young men, and they'd feel like they could talk about mental health. So like in my blog, like I talk about different ways for young men to improve themselves as well as also to try to improve their mental state, like do like meditation and different other like exercises to try to I guess like like be okay with like talking to people about their emotions and stuff. Yeah.
I think that's so innovative, and I think that trying to find a way for boys and young men to talk about mental health is such a challenge. I mean, I can speak about that from my own experience, and I wanted to ask you, Brian, about you. I mean, you have such a passion for trying to get boys to talk about mental health. Can you talk about your own mental health journey and how you've been able to talk about that openly?
Oh, okay. So like in my freshman year, I felt as well, like as I mentioned before, like very isolated, like from my like school community. And honestly, it was not, it was like it was I would say like not a good experience overall. It was probably like like a pretty low point in my life. Um, yeah, but I also felt like it was just like I felt like just like so alone in this issue. Like I felt like I was the only one like dealing with this issue by myself. Like I had to like pull myself out of it. And I felt like this is something like other people should not go through alone. Like people should like other young boys really should try to ask for help and try to like stay with like talk to their friends about it or their family about it. Like they shouldn't just feel like they have to carry it alone. So I guess that's what I would say. But overall, I feel like after actually like becoming interested in boys' mental health, I feel like my own mental health has improved because like I've learned more about like the solutions and like the problem and like the solutions to the issues in mental health today.
I think that is something to be applauded because I know when I was your age, when I was in high school, I definitely was dealing with a lot of mental health issues and concerns. But you're right, no one's really talking about it. I think they're talking about it more, but I think that there's still a lot to be done, on the school level. And that's why Avidum is so important, because Avidum is in schools trying to get students aware about these issues. So I wanted to ask you about not just boys, but youth, because I know that, mental health is a concern for any young person, right? So, you're a youth, you're a boy in high school right now. What are you seeing um, with mental health overall among youth?
Yeah. Honestly, today, like I feel like youth mental health, like I feel like there's a lot of people like talking about it today, and especially because of like social media. Um, I feel like I feel like people like maybe I feel like more like people are feeling like they're not enough because of like social media and stuff. I think that like I think that maybe social media might not be the cause of a lot of mental health issues, like they'll always exist, but I think it's exacerbating a lot of the symptoms of especially in youth. Because like in our youth, like it's a time of like great change and a lot of like becoming adults. There's a lot of like stress already, but like social media is like pushing that further because like you're on like a global scale, like you're hearing about like everyone's different stress and people are like comparing themselves to each other, which I think is really harmful for both boys and girls, I think. Um, yeah, I guess, and I think among youth, like I think that a lot of youth are aware of like mental health, but maybe some of them still are not trying to um I don't know, they're aware of it, but maybe they're still not like going and asking for help. Like they're just still silently dealing with it. Yeah.
And I think that's the thing is dealing with mental health in silence can be very dangerous. But I know that you and others are working to kind of break the silence, and so are we at Avidum. I'm wondering if you could talk about this project that you created called Mind the Boys.
Oh, definitely. Okay, so Mind the Boys, like I found it after like I wanted to expand my reach from incremental more into like high school boys because like I myself am a high school boy, so like I kind of like understand it. So I founded Mind the Boys, which is like an educational outreach program that aims to like deal with the silent crisis of boys' mental health. So actually in collaboration with a Vitam, I've actually I created a curriculum that like focuses on talking about boys' mental health, like both why it actually is an issue, and then also like some proposed solutions to try to like make more boys aware of mental health. And actually in collaboration with Avita, I'm going to get my I'm going to be collaborating with them on like a November event where we're going to be like focusing on during the month of November, the chapters, the VDM chapters will be focusing like on like men's and boys' mental health during that month.
That is fantastic, Brian. I think that first of all, partnering with Avidum, I think is fantastic. And I think that you taking another step in raising awareness is really going to help. Um, can you talk about the impact of what you're doing? What are you seeing from your blog and from Mind the Boys? How are you seeing it make a difference in your community and in your school?
Actually, yeah, so like for my readers from Incremental, I found like people have found it like really inspiring and like boys have like talked to me, like they've reached out to me, they've talked about like wow, like I was really struggling, but like from reading your blog, like I felt like more motivated in my life. I felt like more drive and purpose. Cause like maybe some people are struggling, like they don't have like they're just kind of like floating like aimlessly and like maybe but like with maybe a little distraction and also some like improvement, like when they improve their bodies, then maybe improve their minds as well. Like to try to, I guess combat like their issues. And from Mind the Boys, I've seen the impact of, I guess, like I've seen boys are becoming more well informed. Like the from the boys I've shared Mind the Boys like to the other boys I've shared Mind the Boys with, like they've become more informed. Like they're like, wow, I didn't realize like some of the statistics I have are like boys are 4 times as more likely to die from suicide as girls are. And they're like, wow, I didn't know that. Like it's completely unknown and they never have heard of that. They would never expected that. So they're really becoming like more informed on like how just big this issue is. And honestly, I think it will cause many more boys to do something about it, which is which is honestly great because like we need more like boys to get involved and like boys to speak up about this. Because if a lot of boys speak up about how their mental health isn't good, like I think more stuff will get done. Yeah.
I agree. I think knowledge is power and boys become men. And I think
Yeah.
men's mental health um, is an issue as well. And it all starts from, how we learn to talk about mental health growing up. Brian, thank you so, so much for the work that you do. And thanks for being on the podcast.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Steven. I really appreciate your time and thank you for having me on the podcast.
While Brian is working hard to connect with peers, we also wanted to hear from a mental health professional who works directly with boys and young men too. Dr. Andrew Clark is a psychiatrist at St. Luke's University Health Network. We talked about what he's seeing at his practice and what young men can do to help their peers. Here's our conversation. So, Dr. Clark, thank you so much for your time as we talk about this issue with young men and mental health. And Brian did a really great job of talking about how this issue impacts him and his peers. And when he was doing that, he was describing mental health concerns among boys and young men as a quote, silent crisis. And I'm wondering, what are you seeing through your practice that speaks to that?
Well, thank you so much for having me. I'm a board certified child and adolescent psychiatrist. I think Brian is absolutely correct that the word silent is very descriptive to the resistance and the avoidance that we see sometimes boys having with each other about sharing their emotions. I see young men and boys wait way too long until a crisis is really no longer, quote, silent, but is obvious and loud, if you will, with violent acts or suicidal behaviors. I have spent my whole career in the trenches of child psychiatry in the emergency room settings, residential inpatient hospital settings, and I see the result that this silence going on too long, it really builds up inside of these young men, and really it's until the ability to express themselves has reached a breaking point that they might not express themselves verbally or in an emotionally appropriate way, but then can become violent at times. Sometimes, even after a suicide attempt or aggressive acts, we'll see this silence continue on these inpatient units and the settings that I'm in. Unfortunately, the young men seem to really shoulder and repress their emotional difficulty much longer than their female peers. And we know there's gender and sex differences in the brain, but also there's very entrenched cultural expectations placed on young men as well.
So, Dr. Clark, I'm wondering if you can talk about these specific issues that young men encounter related to mental health. You mentioned that there are gender differences here, but when we're talking about young men in particular, what are they dealing with specifically when it comes to their mental health?
Well, compared to the girls, you see a lot more aggression in what we call intermittent explosive disorder, where we really see the powder keg go boom. Isolation too is a big problem. So we'll have that depression take a different shape where it's not being verbalized, it's not emotionally being expressed with tears, and there's this hesitation and resistance about sharing feelings among the boys. Sometimes this is modeled by their fathers and other like male role models. Depression, anxiety, they're very common states of mind for all human beings, and all persons at one time or another will experience these feeling states. But specifically, if you want to get into trends, we are seeing an increase actually of anorexia, even, and anxiety-driven body image issues amongst boys that were not really recognized in the past. And I sort of suspect social media could be playing a role here, with the bombardment of images of ideal masculine physiques, like having a perfect six-pack or what have you. So it's a fluid and changing field that I'm in, and we do see differences in gender and sex, but we also have seen old stereotypes start to change, such as eating disorders amongst boys.
It's so interesting to hear that body image among young men is turning into these really severe and serious issues. So that's just news for me, but I'm sure also many of our listeners. And I want to talk about this concept of manliness and mental health. I know growing up, mental health was not seen as something that men do. Men just need to man up, per se, when it comes to their feelings. So I guess my question for you is, how much do gender roles play into how we address mental health?
Yeah, certainly a great deal. I was a biology major back in my day, and I really subscribe to a scientific approach. And there are certainly biological differences in terms of the genetic and regulatory factors for neurodevelopment, and yet we know that there's a sociocultural factor also that's at play. And so the idea of masculinity and femininity are sort of ancient ideas, and masculinity has got a multi-generational and evolutionarily complex set of dynamics that involve these biological and environmental factors. And trying to understand how to allow boys to be boys without ascribing terms like toxic masculinity to all things culturally male, I think is very important. This idea that there is this man up or bro culture out there, and how to acknowledge that the boys and young men who subscribe to it have real mental health issues at times, that they do suffer, and yet there's ways that they find supports with each other by sort of identifying in different kind of ways with this kind of culture. There's some strength in the resilience that some of this may bring. So it's not all bad, and yet the idea that is this all or nothing thinking of not being able to talk about your emotions at all. I think that's where things are really unhealthy. So many young men can and do find support with each other and emotionally express themselves, but I think it just has a different way it goes about. It may take more time. It may take a different kind of space and trust to build these relationships than perhaps amongst girls. For example, I often observe a level of physicality and roughhousing play that will bring boys together differently than girls. And you see that at times in younger younger boys, that then sort of travels through middle school and sometimes to high school. And these things, may be, somewhat culturally bound and reinforced as a gender role. But there's some, studies that, suggest that perhaps there's a level of biological, aspect to this. So it's definitely a complex topic. We have to acknowledge that there's many traditional masculine role models that have great moments of showing vulnerability and emotion. And sometimes manning up might even mean dealing with the expressions of painful emotion, such as like extreme fear, sadness, or loss. And I think whether that's movies or in real examples that we see of the idea of the hardened tough guy who can shed a tear and who can get down on one knee and be empathetic. I think it's important to have these examples, and I think a lot of fathers and grandfathers play those examples to show young men that it's okay to express their pain and their feelings. But gender roles have been studied and discussed in the context of mental health for ages, and there's been a science built to them over 50 some years. And There's certainly a lot of change and adaptations and things that we have to take into account, which probably the last 10 years have really brought a lot of trends and changes in terms of non-binary and transgendered individuals. But we've always been able to find significant differences regarding the presentations and courses of mental illness. And to get into all of them is really beyond the time of this podcast, but the overall idea is that, perceptions of being vulnerable and soft seem to be the fear that consumes a lot of the boys from being able to find the support with each other that they need.
Dr. Clark, you said something really powerful about the concept of manning up and saying that sometimes that means dealing with these painful emotions. And I think sometimes that gets lost. Sometimes it's the opposite. Sometimes we're meant to believe that manning up means to hide or to ignore these emotions. But what we're hearing is, specifically with the male influences in our lives, sometimes manning up, quote unquote, means to deal with these emotions. So I wanted to ask you, let's say per se that a young man is listening to this episode and maybe he's got a male peer that he's worried about when it comes to mental health. In your work, you speak with young men quite often on the issue of mental health. So is there some advice that you can share with this hypothetical young man that could help get the conversation going?
Yeah, I mean, again, it can be really tough amongst boys. It depends where they're at with the relationship to start. And, perhaps this peer, might have the most success with some sort of ice-breaking way to distract, if you will, that peer to feel a little less guarded and to join in and to be recognized. Isolation, is a big issue for a boy who's depressed and very anxious amongst his peers. So they don't really feel that they're being seen. They kind of want to hide out. And so if a friend was able to really, bring some connection, even, noticing, maybe the team on their shirt or a rock and roll band that's that they're wearing, or complimenting their shoes to a degree, just something to recognize an interest, or even just a side note about like the weather of the day, like just to try to ease in to work towards a more vulnerable moment. These illnesses really mess with a sense of belongingness. So to make a peer who seems really isolated and perhaps struggling with depression and anxiety included, so if that friend could be like, hey, sit with us today, or I might be doing something with my one buddy and maybe you could come along. Like the idea that inclusion is really going to help that person a great deal. It's important that he feels belong and seen. Some of the ways that you just compliment a nice fit, or even a hey, what's up? That friend, could maybe, just even in a kidding way, just give a little, shoulder hit, or as they do, a dab sometimes, which is just sort of like a modern day teenage handshake, if you will. But I hope your listeners know what a dab is. and so, at the end of the day, there's a moment of some courage to cross that line, to show that concern. And, this hypothetical friend might be able to, express themselves in a way like, I've been there, or hey man, sometimes I'm not good either. I don't think a perfect way, and it could definitely take a minute, and it could be a timing thing, but ultimately it gets to that question that I think is where everybody's got to be a little bit stronger, which is, are you doing all right? Do you have anyone to talk to about what you're going through or what you're feeling? And being able to end it up with like, you're not alone. I'm here for you. And to mean it by, being able to think of things that, these kids have access to a lot of resources. They're made aware of different hotlines, safe to say, school guidance officers and school therapists, and the mental health literacy has really increased in the schools. So, I think there's a lot of hope to have that people can access resources.
Absolutely. And I think that what you're describing is what Brian and many of his peers are trying to do. So it's really helpful to hear that guidance, especially for people who don't necessarily have those resources available. But Dr. Clark, thank you so much for your time and for laying out this really important information that could really make a difference in someone's life. So thank you so much, Dr. Clark.
Absolutely. Take care.
We want to thank both Brian and Dr. Clark for not only sharing their perspectives on this issue, but for actively working to make a difference. Avidum is proud to partner with Brian on his Mind the Boys project and make resources about young men's mental health available to all of our clubs. The project is teaming up with Movember, a charity movement that raises awareness about men's mental health. During the month of November, men are encouraged to grow mustaches as a symbol and a conversation starter to bring more awareness to men's mental health, including suicide prevention. You can visit the campaigns page of the Avidum website to download some free resources about this topic that you can use in your school. And since we know most of our club members can't actually grow mustaches, we do have a limited number of free mustache temporary tattoos that we can give to schools who sign up to run a Mind the Boys campaign this fall. We've got all the details on the Mind the Boys campaign page on our website at avidum.org. As always, thank you for listening to the Avidum podcast. Special thanks to WellSpan for their support and to ND Sites for editing. You can follow Avidum on Instagram at Avidum. That's AEVIDUM. And check out our website, avidum.org, to learn even more. I'm Stephen G. Winmall, and I've got your back.